Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Opapari, and this is the Songwriters on Process podcast. Since 2010, I've been interviewing songwriters about their writing process. And on this podcast, we go deep, deep, deep into the writing process. Far deeper than the usual. Do you start with the lyrics or the music question? By way of background, I have a PhD in English literature, and I'm a prose writer myself. I'm not a songwriter. In fact, I've never written a song in my life. But my goal has always been to treat songwriters the same way that we treat prose writers and poets, just as writers, plain and simple, and have always been interested in the writing process. This is an intelligent conversation between two writers. And on this podcast, like I said, we go deep into the process. We talk about rituals, the seeds of inspiration, the role of movement on the process, writer's block, the revision process, pens, pencils, types of paper, and of course, we talk about books. You can find all the archived interviews on the Songwriters on Podcast website and across all streaming platforms. And with that, let's dive into this week's episode. And today on the podcast, it's Pete Yorn. Pete does not remember this, of course, but I started this site in 2010. It's only been a podcast for a couple of years. And before that, I would just interview people, transcribe the interviews, and then put them in transcribed form on the site. You can find all of those interviews archived. Anyway, way back in 2010, when I started this site, Pete was one of my first interviews. And I used to teach at Colgate University in upstate New York. And Pete went to Syracuse, and we talked about the soul-crushing winters in upstate New York. And if you spent time up there, you know what I'm talking about. But so this is the second time I've interviewed Pete. He has a new album out, his 10th solo studio album. It is called The Hard Way. It is out now. We had a good discussion here. A couple interesting points. We talked about writer's block. He said he does not believe in writer's block. And we talked about whether writer's block exists or whether it is, as the writer Anthony Doerr told me, a failure of courage. And it's just about just got to get the stuff out there. Don't be afraid to write really crappy stuff. But my favorite part of the interview, and unfortunately, because this is a podcast, you can't really see this, obviously, but at some point during the podcast, Pete went off camera for a few seconds, came back and brought a folder that he has kept since his days at Syracuse. And, Pete is, I think, 50. So he graduated, 30 years ago. And back when he was just starting out as a songwriter, he kept a Syracuse folder, Syracuse notebook with all of these ideas. And he still has it. And he brought it and he showed it to me. Again, you can't see it, but he reads from it during the podcast. You can see him actually read some of the lyrics, some of the song ideas, some of the songs that later were on later albums. But he has kept that thing for all this time. And, this yellowed paper, old weathered paper, but it is still there, the original notebook. And it's really cool because we talked about how often songwriters keep journals, notebooks from years ago, and most of them do. They're stocked away somewhere, but they're there. And he has that one way back from his college days. So check that out at some point during the podcast. We had a great discussion about that. So again, Pete Yorn, his latest album, The Hard Way, his 10th solo studio album, is out now. And here is my interview with Pete Yorn. Are you an everyday writer in some fashion? I don't care how bad it is. Or do you think that writing every day makes things derivative? Some songwriters fall into both categories, right? Only write when the mood strikes, or you got to write every day no matter how bad it is.
Yeah. I don't have an opinion on this, what other people do, as for them. But I'm not an everyday writer at all. I would say I'm pretty lazy about it. And when I say lazy, I'm lazy and really chasing it too hard, because I do feel like even with that, I've been pretty prolific, because one thing is I never believed in this thing called writer's block. I don't believe in it. I feel like it's just I mean, there could be a block to writing something better than you've ever written before, or not, but the actual thing is just to do it. The only person in your way is yourself, so you just have to just you could write anything really. And I usually find that that leads to writing more things. So like I used to think that um you would have to be motivated to actually want to do something to do it. And then I learned probably in my 30s um that sometimes you got to meet things halfway, like just start doing something and you'll find the motivation once you start doing it typically. So you can't sit around and wait for stuff to happen. But at the same time, in the same breath, I don't chase songs. I go weeks without listening to really music at all. Like I'll just listen to Howard Stern or something, like in the car. Um, and or I'll listen to like my daughter's playlist. My little daughter is going to be 9, and she'll like sometimes play some music. I don't play Howard when she's in the car, but I don't. Yeah, and then other times I get really into it, and it reminds me when I do go back to listening to music or start like meeting it halfway. I remember very fast, usually, like how powerful it is to me and how it affects me, and like it just like awakens a lot of things like in my DNA, I feel like.
So you're okay with if nothing's happening for a week or two or whatever, you're okay with that. That doesn't make you anxious.
No, yeah, that doesn't make me anxious at all.
I would tell my students, writer's block doesn't happen because it's not that we don't know what to say. It's because we don't know where to begin. And I think often people, at least with prose, I mean, I'm a prose writer, not a songwriter, but I've often told people, like, often you know what you want to say, but often it's people think I've got all the stuff I want to say later, but I can't say it yet because I haven't written the beginning of whatever it is that they're writing. And it reminds me of what I interviewed Anthony Doerr, the writer. He wrote All the Light We Cannot See and a bunch of other amazing books. And he told me he doesn't believe in writer's block either. He told me it's a failure of courage. And I've always thought about that it's a failure of courage. And I think that's what you're talking about. That's just don't be afraid to write the bad stuff, right?
Yeah, it's just you're just being judgmental and you're just getting in your way. And like I said, you might not be as inspired to write something or have something to say, as you might, a week from now or 2 weeks ago, or whatever. And usually when you really feel inspired and you have something to say, that's the easy time. That's you just kind of naturally go for it. You don't have to think about it. But it's those times where it is like, you're kind of blank and you're not feeling it, but you feel like you have this need to do it anyway, maybe out of a um insecurity that you won't be able to ever do it again or something. I don't know what would force you to if you don't feel like doing it. But like I said, um, I feel like you just got to get out of your own way. I always say, like, I've made this analogy before and it's kind of gross, but like you start writing and you're like, just it's like picking at a scab on your skin, and then you slowly just pick the scab off. And at first, it's just kind of the scab and just crap and everything. And then all of a sudden, some stuff starts oozing out, and then the good blood starts coming out down there, and you get the good stuff. So it's just a matter of doing it. And yeah, I feel like anyone who's searched, I think, knows that you know you just have to get out of your own way and just do it. So as Nike would say, simple. As simple as that is, it really is all you have to do. I can't
It-
say it'll be good,
yeah.
but that no one's talking about good. That's another judgment. You know what I mean? So you can't get to great without even trying. And so if you're not trying, you're not going to write anything anyway. So it's self-imposed.
And the other thing is that we can't look at writing as the mere output of things from the brain to the paper. as you write, you're also shaking things out. So I feel like writing is a way, not just a way to get the ideas out there on the paper or wherever it is, but as you write, more things come to you because you are writing.
Absolutely. And I would think of it as like like if you're just talking to a friend and you're trying to maybe you're stuck somewhere in your life and you want to bounce it off, just what's going on in your head, not even as a writer, this is a human. You bounce things off your friend and they hear you talk, they listen and they hear you talk. And sometimes you come up with the answer yourself by the end of the conversation. And sometimes they have good advice for you. And that's all you're really doing. You should just look at it as the process. It's not even so much being so focused on the outcome. That's how everyone's programmed. And, ultimately, it really is. I find that if you're focused on the process and you find a way to enjoy the process and stay present for that and work within that, then you'll naturally write better stuff. And you'll naturally, I think, be more happy with the outcome when you're not focused on outcomes, ironically.
Do you ever think about where you are? I do, certainly, when those, ideas and those inspiring ideas come. I mean, last month I was hiking out in Wyoming and in South Dakota and just surrounded by nothing but open
Good for
space.
you. Good for
Yeah,
you. That's amazing.
it was amazing. And all I could think about when I'm surrounded by open space around me, I couldn't stop the ideas. But I don't get those ideas. Like I know people get them in urban environments. They like walking down the streets of New York, but that's not me at all. It was when there was complete, like I remember standing in the middle of, wherever I was, and there was silence. There was nothing. You couldn't hear any planes, nothing. And it's just it poured forth. And I thought, wow, I need to take advantage of that more, of getting into those spaces. So do you ever think about like where you are environmentally, where you're at your most inspired?
Um, that's a great question. And like I have a really good friend of mine who's always interested in me, like going on a road trip to write or going to a certain kind of like, cabin or a remote place. I think he gets really inspired that way. And I've said, I've never like, sometimes I might happen, but like, I have a weird imagination and, I've always had it since I've been a little kid. And I could be in the bathroom, shower, you know, just anywhere mundane and I could come up with something that or something will I'm not actively coming up with it, something will hit me in a mundane place that will have nothing to do with that place and I could just turn that into something. So I remember I remember a few years ago I was going to Hawaii and someone was like, oh, you're gonna write some tunes there, and I was like, I doubt it. I don't know, maybe, but I don't. It's not like a thing for me. But I get it that it is for some people, and they do great stuff that way. Like they need to get away, like maybe from their surroundings to get, maybe that opens something up in their mind where they're able to connect with some sort of source, and that's great, So
All right, let's talk about that. That was going to be one of my questions. There was an article in the Washington Post about a year ago about why we get our best ideas in the shower.
hmm.
And the thinking is that when you're engaged in an unconscious activity that requires no thought, that's when the ideas bubble up. I could tell you on and on endlessly the number of songwriters who have told me they get ideas when they are folding laundry, vacuuming, gardening. Agatha Christie said the best time to plan a book is when you're doing the dishes. And I've got this David Byrne quote. He says, "A car is a good place to write lyrics. Driving occupies one part of the brain, freeing up the other." So I think there's a lot of research and anecdotes about the ideas come to us when we're not thinking about them coming to us. They're coming to us when we're doing things that require no thought, hence your shower ideas.
It makes perfect sense. I didn't know any of this, so that's pretty cool to hear it. That it's some sort of scientific thing. But I find, like in the shower, you know, it's so easy to not be present and not be like grateful. So I try to like when I'm in the shower lately, like uh, I focus on the job at hand, but I I I would find that my mind would just wander, like I'd be
Yeah.
thinking about, oh, I got to do this and we got to do this. I'm gonna, there's like things like to-do lists, stuff like that, or just like stressing about something, or and then all of a sudden I like snap, I catch myself and I witness it, and I'm like, whoa, 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 dude. And I would default to gratitude now. I'm like, dude, you're so lucky to have this hot water, this shower, this nice shower soap. Like, focus on this, like really take it in, kind of like, you know, this sort of Zen like moment appreciation stuff. And I guess when I get more present like that, it probably might take away from creativity. I don't know, but in a way, I find that if I'm present, then creativity will happen naturally, maybe later or something. But I feel like appreciation, it's good for my mood, at least, at the very least, to have that sort of awareness for what I'm doing. And I bring it back to, I'm like, you're like 2 weeks ahead or something thinking about something, and I'll bring it back to just this. You just enjoy this shower right now, a simple thing like that. But the funny thing about a shower, I was just traveling up in Mendocino, California, and on our way there, we stopped in Bodega Bay, and I had I was like in a jacuzzi, and I had met like this. There were all these weird coincidences. Like this woman was wearing a hat of this resort I had stayed at, and then like two people over in the jacuzzi, unrelated, there was a guy who was wearing a Tokyo hat, and I was just in Tokyo, and I was like, I just had some weird idea for a creepy movie that hit me, like, how when you wake up from a dream and it all makes perfect sense and you
Yeah.
like have it, and then it kind of like, if you don't really write it down or like pay attention to it, it'll just kind of like slip away as if it was a fog, and it's just kind of then becomes esoteric. I was in the shower and this hit me perfectly, this whole idea for a movie. And I and then what happened was I kind of had the idea while I'm still in the shower. It's all very fast, like lightning. And and it would be a creepy movie, but a cool movie. Um, but then all of a sudden, and my thinking mind starts getting in the way of it, like, oh wait, but that wouldn't make sense, or oh, how would you do that? And I think it goes back to what we're talking about. Writer's block is like when you get in your own way, you start trying to like you stop on creativity. You start like with your like real world human analytical mind. You go in too early with that. Like, it's cool to bring that in later once you have a real inspirational thing that like is living. But when you go in too early with that thinking critical mind, you stomp on creativity, and you stomp on ideas before they've had a chance to blossom. Because then once I started saying why an idea wasn't good, and I believed that for like a few minutes, all of a sudden I was like, wait, no, it doesn't have to be that way. It actually could work that way totally. And I like you just get in your way. So yeah, that's the shower story.
Yeah, well, Matt Nathanson, I've had him on a few times. Matt told me that he's named that thing. It's called the assassin, and he hates the assassins on his shoulder, and he hates the assassin because it's the one that says, "Don't write that" or "cross that out." And he has a name for it, but no, I mean, I think back to that whole monotonous activity. It's when I think the key is the activity has to be something that's repetitive. So mowing a lawn, or just something that, again, it's so fascinating how not just songwriters but creative types get those ideas. If you sit there and you think, let me think of some ideas, they're not going to happen, but they happen when you're not thinking about trying to get them.
Yeah. And the other thing is really, it's just doing it. It's like you're not going to make a sandwich unless you go make the sandwich. And as simple as that sounds, you have to just go do it. It's you can sit around thinking about it, you can sit around talking about it, but you have to just go do it.
My favorite essay that I would teach my students was an essay by the novelist Anne Lamott, and it's called Shitty First Drafts. And her whole thing is, it's from one of the book is called Bird by Bird, but the essay is in there. And shitty first drafts, like we were saying, get out of your way, no matter how bad it is, get it all out there. If nothing else, because if you start making those decisions too early, then you may need those things later on, but you already decided not to write it, and then you're screwed. So I always think
Yeah.
overwriting is better anyway.
Yeah. And the other thing is like sometimes you wrote out a bunch of things, and maybe 9 out of 10 of them are derivative and not interesting, but maybe there's one thing there that's a start. And you could, if they say that was your chorus, right? Like one thing with like writing songs, like sometimes you could have fun where like you think you have this amazing chorus and you're like, all right, what if you made that the verse, write a new chorus, and see what you come up, just for a goof, see
Yeah.
what you come up with. Or if you're writing a shitty first draft, you have one thing that's good, and okay, now you could build up that, and then you would have had nothing if you just, just were like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. So
Uh, is your phone filled with voice memos? I had a group on the podcast recently, Magdalena Bay, and the woman told me she has 2,000. They counted. She has 2,002 voice memos on her phone, filled with ideas, but there's no organization to those ideas whatsoever. So, do you have just is your voice memo filled with lyrical ideas, melody ideas?
yeah, I I probably have like uh I don't know how many things titled cool progress, uh which is basically like an interesting little guitar progression or melody progression. Uh and there's tons of those, absolutely tons of those. One of the songs from my new record that's coming out, um came some of the part of it came to me in a dream, that old story, which had never really happened to me before. And it woke me up. I heard this beautiful melody in my head while I was asleep, and it woke me up out of the dream. And I was like, it's like 3 a.m. on Valentine's Day, I remember last year. And I was laying in bed. I'm so tired. I'm like, oh, that was really pretty. That sounds cool. But I just want to lay in bed. I'm like, get up and go in the bathroom and sing it, hum it into the voice memo, hum it, go get up. And I'm like laying there for like 5 minutes, like, or it seemed like 5 minutes, like, should I go? No. And then finally I was like, oh, and I begrudgingly got up and went into the bathroom and I hummed it into the phone. And then I went back to bed. And then sure enough, that ended up in one of the songs from this new record. And that was a voice memo.
So did you take that voice memo and mix it with something else that was on your phone, or how does that work?
It was just the idea was there, so I was able to just use it in another song that I was working on. So it was this it changed a little bit, like the word I had said changed a little bit, but the phrasing of it remained the same. And it ended up being it came from a dream, and it ended up being like my highest charting and longest charting song at radio since like the 2019 or something like that.
And that was the one that came to you in the dream.
Yeah.
I do hear
Yeah.
that a lot. And I wish I remember the name of the book. There was a novel I read. I could probably find it. Anyway, the main character is a writer, and what he would do was he'd get his ideas it was a horrible idea, but he would tape a pencil to his finger so that when he got those ideas, he was able to write them down immediately. Now, of course, that's incredibly dangerous because you can, poke yourself in the eye. But because someone told him, like, with every second after you wake up, that idea is just flying down the hall. Like, it's not, so you've got to write it as quick. And I love that idea of taping a pen to your finger so that the ideas come to you. Are you a pen and paper person or a computer person? Pen and paper or computer when it comes to lyrics?
Um, Out of convenience, uh, kind of the note memos, on my iPhone. Um, uh, I usually put a lot of lyrics in there. I recently started kind of talking lyrics, talk typing them, and that's a hit or miss as far as the accuracy. But sometimes you get something that maybe you didn't intend that is interesting too. But yeah, I just like to get it down. Like I'll write like a lot of verses, I'll write extra verses, and sometimes, I don't know where they're going to end up, but any sort of phrases or things that I think are interesting, I'll put them down in my phone because it's just great to have it in your phone wherever I'm going. If I do get inspired, I just have it, as opposed to having to carry a notebook around. I know it's a lot more romantic to have like a cool notebook and a quill pen and ink next to me and a candle I'm carrying around. I carry this candle around with me everywhere I go.
Right.
But so I have candlelight to write by. But one cool thing I did on my new record, I was collaborating with my friend Josh, and he introduced me to the note shared notes part of the notes app. I never shared notes before. And all of a sudden, like we'd be working on something, all of a sudden I'll get like a shared note. And I'm like, what? And I see you later. I'm like, hey, it's all right here. That's cool. And then I could change it and it shares back. And that was that was I got into that. That was kind of cool. Um, but
You're
yeah,
not a
it's
pen and paper,
cool.
no pens and paper. You're strictly or pencil. You're strictly
I'm not against it. I
yeah,
do. I have, of course. I've been doing this for a long time,
yeah.
and I've definitely pencil. I have books I could show you. I have. If you want me to grab it, I'll show you the old. It's a Syracuse folder
Wow.
that says interviewing because I was supposed to take a class called interviewing freshman year, but I never took it. I think I dropped it before classes even started, and I have it if you want to see it. And it's stuffed with. So I used to just write everything pen and paper on this little just legal pad kind of, and I would write. I would list in order every song as I wrote them. So we'll start at one, and there's hundreds of them. And you want to see it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I gotta show you
Yeah, of
because you
course.
guys. All right, wait one sec.
All right, okay.
Could you see?
I can.
So this is filled. Um, and there's all the songs. It's falling apart now, but it's just a list of songs, and I'd write everything. And it's dated. They're all dated. Here the first one. January 24th, 1996 or 98. No, it's 96 because it's 1017 Harrison Street, Syracuse, New York. And this is a song called I Don't Know. And oh yeah, it never came out, but I know I used to play it a long time ago. But every song, where I was, the date, the time, 7:05 p.m. I was very serious about it. Um,
So
but
do you go
not
back do you go back to that ever?
so very rarely. But I will say, so just this first page has 60 songs. The first one's called The One, Fit of Joy, Kalamazoo, So High. That's going back to high school. And I look at it, and the first song that ever got released, not in order, but of this list that ever came out, number 11 is called Someday, and that came out. It's the last song on the breakup album with Scarlett, and I guess I pulled an old song out because that song came out in 2008 or 9. But so the first song that ever got pulled and came out was my 11th song that I wrote. And then there's a whole bunch that never came out, never and made it on a record uh until we get to sorry, bear with me. Uh some demos that never came out. Nope, nope. All at Once, number 53 was on Day I Forgot. So I went back to that song in 2002 when I recorded it. So yeah, Syracuse.
That's amazing. That thing is so stuffed. It's like George
Yeah.
Costanza's wallet. Uh
Yeah.
so do you are there songs on the new album, a song that because I feel like every time songwriter will tell me a story about how a song on the latest album took 10 years to write because they wrote something and then could never find a way to finish it, and then all of a sudden there's a eureka moment and they went back. So is there any song like that on the new album?
No, the stuff on the new record is all brand new, very new, and I think reflective of um my life in the last couple of years, year and a half. But I did discover like sometimes I would get stuck, and this is my own fault because I didn't realize like, dude, this is what you can do. But if you have like I'd write like a great part of a song, but I was never able to finish the song for some reason. I was like, the chorus just isn't hitting right, but these verses, the melody is so cool, or it's a great riff. And I would just leave it as is and forget about it because I always had ideas coming. But now it occurs to me, it's like, and I've done it a few times, where I call them spare parts. I'm like, well, you got this great part, and now you have this other part. Like, what if you just kind of put them together and a lot of times it's like this new thing that's like, yeah, sweet. So you get to finally get that cool thing out, and now you added something new without trying to make it together, like without trying to finish that song that you were stuck on. So
So you're drawing from different sources, then put it together to make one song.
yeah, it's like grabbing that old. I think I heard Bruce talk about this one on a documentary for Darkness on the Edge of Town. Maybe I could be wrong, but I feel like he was saying, he's like, yeah, you pull that old carburetor from there. It's like having an old car, and you got to pull this, that muffler from that old car from the junkyard and throw it in here and get it working, and then all of a sudden you got a working car, and I'm like, there you go, let's try that,
Yeah,
so.
and not to sound like an old man, but the advantage of when you go back to that notebook and you can almost see the emotional state you're in, probably in some of those things, like the way the letters are. You know, you just don't get that if you're looking at a phone or looking at a typewritten lyric sheet, right? I mean, I feel like going back and you see there's much more of a sense of time travel when you can actually picture yourself when you were writing those lyrics, right?
Well, it's special. I mean, it's special to have this as a thing. I'm happy that I, kept track of it like that, but I don't over romanticize it at the same time, because for me, like, I don't judge anybody, but you want to watch a movie, you got to be in a big theater on a big screen, and that's how you got to do it. Like, I'll watch like a Scorsese movie on my iPhone and I'll love it as much, like, and don't tell him that, but I'll tell him that. But I, I don't I never get so caught up in the mediums and the specifics about things. I'm just like, is it hit me or not? And it could hit me from my iPhone, or it could hit me from piece of paper. I could look back at some of these songs and be like, oh, terrible. Whatever.
Yeah.
Like, just it was me just kind of going through stuff. But I was very into quantity back then. I remember I was just I would just write 3 songs a day. They would just come out and pour out of me. Not because I was even trying to, just I naturally had this very kinetic energy. I was just like, oh, and I remember calling family members, my older brothers specifically. They were already living in California when I was in Syracuse still, and I had like crazy long distance bills. I would call, like, dude, check, because my middle brother was the drummer in my band at some point. He taught me how to play drums, and we were so connected by music. They turned me on to so much music that I love. But I would every day I'd be calling, be like, dude, check out this new song. And I'd like be playing over the phone, acoustic guitar, like so I just remember that so vividly. So I was so excited to kind of write. So in a weird way, I'll say one of my brothers are kind of my muse in a weird way. Like, I sometimes think, like when I finish a song, I'm like, oh, I can't wait, and I'm really stoked on it. Like, I'll send it to him first, still, all these years later. And I'm like, I think just because he turned me on to like all the stuff that ended up influencing me. You have those. I don't know if you have older siblings or had that thing, or you were the older sibling or whatever, or not. But you turn your family on to music and art, and
Yeah.
like it's very you know it's a thing. It's a very formative thing, and you remember that. And so, yeah, even today, sometimes I'm just like, I always joke, I'm like, yeah, I'm just writing these songs for you, dude. Just to my middle brother. Yeah, it's funny.
All right, a couple more questions. I'm much more of a morning person when it comes to writing. And I do have some rituals, like if I'll never write and revise in the same chair. So if I'm writing here, I revise in the chair behind me. And I'm much more effective in the morning. So how much do those things matter to you? Time of day, favorite room, things you have to have with you, favorite chair. Does that matter at all?
It doesn't matter. I am on an earlier schedule these days just because having my daughter, I like to be kind of up and down with her. And I like that. I used to be a night owl, and I definitely, my brain's different at night for sure. Like in the like I get this like lull, like 4 or 5 o'clock, just an energy. typically. Even if I had like a light lunch, I'll still just get this kind of like, oh, do I have to go out tonight, or I gotta go do, like, I used to get scared. Like, I'm not gonna talk about this, but I'll just briefly say, if I had a show that night and I'd be feeling so tired, like 4 or 5 o'clock, I'm like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this show later, man. Like, I'd worry about it and give me anxiety. And then I'd realize as soon as the sun goes down, something changes in my chemistry, and I'm just like a different person. So there is something magical about the night for me, sure, but I do like to get to bed early. I have good, clean energy in the morning. I used to have more anxious energy in the morning. Like, I'd wake up for years. I'd wake up like early, too early, and I'd be anxious about something, and my brain would like be seeing the whatever it was. It would all make perfect sense of why I was to be anxious about this thing, And I'm happy that that's kind of not so much there anymore. Uh, but but yeah, I could write anywhere. I write where my guitars are. So my guitars are in the front of my house near the fireplace. I just leave acoustic guitars just sitting around that room. And so that's where I tend to just go if I want to strum the guitar. And if I have the guitar in my hand, I'm more likely to start writing something. So that's why maybe it happens there. It starts there.
So weird question, but when you've got the guitar, are you, when you playing it, are you standing up or sitting down? You'd be surprised the answers I get to that question.
I'm usually standing.
You are? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Walking or
Yeah.
staying still?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I think back to the movement part, right? If you're, moving around, um, you tend to be more productive. But yeah, people are very particular about that. Got to be sitting, got to be standing, got to be moving around. Um,
Yeah. I'm like, in the keep bringing it back to this, but like, I'm kind of about, as I get older, I just turned 50, and I'm like, as people get older, they tend to put more rules in place, more rules, more ways of, oh, it has to be like this. And I'm going the other way, man. And it's hard. And there's a lot of themes in this record that are like that. Like, change is hard, and breaking these old habits and old ways of reacting to things and old ways of doing things or needing things to be a certain way. Fuck that. I'm going the other way as I get older and want to just be more open and more just like prove to myself that you don't need these certain conditions to be able to do anything, that you could just be open and super free. Because I think that's what getting old is to me. I think is just more rules, more like set in your ways, that cliche. And I feel like just kind of being open and free is really interesting to me, much more interesting.
how much do you get to read? Uh, or other artistic activities? I mean, I typically end these interviews with, talking about books that people like and songwriters like, but how much do you get to read? Are you a genre person or an author person? Yeah, let's hear it.
I um know that I should read more, because whenever I do, it's very rewarding. I say, if you could when you get into a good book, it's the best bang for the buck there is. Like, you get, and I'm not a fast reader, and I could take like a few paragraphs and I'll like marinate on that for like days, and then I'll go back. But the book that I'm obsessed with now, and it's the third time reading it, is Bob Dylan Chronicles, Volume 1. I had bought that for a gift for myself back when it came out in 2004 or 5, whatever the heck it was, and I forgot I had found it like on somewhere, and I pulled it out like a year ago, and I read it, and it inspired me so much. And then I'm reading it again, and I'm just savoring it. But uh, there's also uh, uh, biography on Theodore Roosevelt that I just started. That's quite interesting, and I need to dig a little. I need to get into the rhythm of the book more, because I'm just still in the early shallows of it. But I can tell it's written in a style that's resonating. But besides reading books, I say whatever. So my daughter's going to be 9, but the last few years, I could be caught up in my day or doing something, or tired, and if she says, like, "Daddy, you want to, You want to do an art lesson with me, or do you want to make a miniature sketchbook with me, or something creative? I'm like at my first like, and I'm just like, yes. I said, made a rule. There's a rule. It's like always say yes to a creative thing with your daughter. And every time I do it, it's so rewarding. I sit down, I get into it. She's like teaching me how to like do pencil shading or something cool like that that I was never good at, or drawing like just free draw, like anything. I'm painting, and I find that to be so rewarding. And I have in my phone, I take a picture of everything we create, and I have art with B, a folder in my photos in my phone of all the things we've created. Um, I feel like it, especially we were doing it a lot like early on in the pandemic, the lockdown, it was just, we're just together all day today, but now we still do it. And it's something that I can't say no to. I have to say yes. And then every time it's rewarding.
And that's it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget my book, Desolation, a heavy metal memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari, that is me, comes out June 25th on Hachette Books. Mark is a good friend of mine. He is one of the guitarists in the band Lamb of God, and this is his memoir. It's a damn good book, if I do say so myself. But again, that book is out June 25th on Hachette Books. You can pre-order it now everywhere, your favorite online bookstore. So be sure to do that. The site, Songwriters on Podcast, contains all of the archived episodes of the podcast. Of course, you can find them on all streaming platforms as well, but they're also on the site. I only have had the podcast for about I don't think even 2 years. Before that, all of the interviews were transcribed, and that took a lot of work. And that's why I started the podcast. So if you want to read the interviews that I did before the podcast, they are on Songwriters on Podcast as well. There are about 200 of them going back to 2010. So check those out. If you want to get a hold of me, Ben at songwritersonprocess.com, or fill out a form on the website. I'm here for your questions, your complaints, your concerns, or your interview suggestions. I'd love getting those as well. So hit me up. I will try to respond. So that's it, everyone. Have a great day and see you next time.